Good morning, everybody. All of the internet fans, hello. Let's wave to the internet. I think, is it this camera, Donnie? Are we waving to? This one over here? Well, hello. Hello to all four of you. It's lovely to see. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so this is the third class in my series, Opera Deep Dive, I've been calling it. But today is one of my favorite classes because it actually talks about how to listen to opera singers. Very frequently, we were talking about this last week a lot, right? Like, there's different people who have different feelings. Some voices are more attractive to some people than others. Some people might say, I like this singer, I dislike this singer. And so there's a certain amount of subjectivity that comes into play here when you're talking about how to listen to singers. But I think there's also things that we should know in classical singing that are considered good, and there are things that are considered not good. And you should know just at least what the rules are. And if there's certain things that we like that are maybe not correct, that's fine. But we should at least know what the rules are of singing, right? There is something, and I think often, at least, this is fun for me to do this course outside of Houston Grand Opera, because at HGO I have to be very careful, and I can't tell anybody that their opinions might not be right. You know what I mean? But I have to say, well, wait a minute, I know a little bit about singing, and that's just ridiculous. That thing you just said, that was actually a great performance.
Is that from the singer's perspective or the audience's perspective?
It's from my perspective.
The audience doesn't care.
Well,
If you're hurting your voice, if you're hurting, we don't care.
I think the audience does care. I think the audience feels emotionally that on some level, if you hear a voice that is straining or tight, your breathing as an audience member will actually be affected, versus whether you hear a singer that really has a healthy instrument where the musculature is working in I don't think an audience would want to hear him sing opera, though. I'm talking opera. This is maybe so. No, but it's a great question. It's a fascinating question, and it's a fascinating conversation because we can go and wax poetic about all different aspects of it, and I want to. But for now, let me start guiding us. No, you're welcome. You're welcome. I appreciate it. Let me start going through. So over the last two courses, what we did here, I'll show you just to catch us up. For our first course here, we did a history of opera. We started with the ancient Greeks, and we went through into modern opera. We talked about singers themselves. Last week, we talked about the difference in the voice types between sopranos and tenors and basses, and we talked about that. This week, we're going to focus on how to listen to singers. And at the end, I might do just like, if anybody wants to maybe stick around, we might do a fourth course next week if you're interested to just come. And there we would just listen to some really legendary performances of opera singers. And these are some of the great nights that are recorded in opera history. So just to recap here, this was our first section that we did 2 weeks ago. I divided up opera history from Renaissance, where opera kind of began. 1597 is the date of the very first opera. We move into the Baroque period pretty quickly. That's a short kind of period of the Renaissance in opera, but in the Baroque is where we get Handel, who comes up with arias, recitative we talked about. Classical then is the next period, which is where we get Mozart. That's where you start to get operas you'd see now in the Opera House, Don Giovanni, Marriage of Figaro, things like that. Rossini also is there, Barber of Seville, things like that. You go down to the Romantic period. This is, again, where probably 70 to 80% of the opera that you're going to see in the Opera House today comes from this period. That's really where the opera art form reaches its zenith. And then a lot of people would argue opera after World War I, it may have fallen off. I think if you went to the opera that we saw at Houston Grand Opera, just performed over the last few weeks, Intelligence, a world premiere, you could argue that opera is very much alive and thriving as a modern art form too. But this is kind of the period. The reason this is important, that I just keep sort of drilling this into you again and again, is because the orchestra got larger over time in history. These operas would maybe have 4 or 5 people playing early violins. They would call them viols, these small kind of consorts you could do in a small room. Here you get into the orchestra. Right around here, Mozart kind of works on the symphony, so you get a larger orchestra. You get down here with Wagner, huge orchestras. So if we're talking about singers, That would mean that if you're a singer that tends to sing romantic music, you probably have a bigger voice. So that's just because the orchestra that you have to compete to sing over is so much larger here than it is here. These early music specialists, they tend to have smaller, more angelic kind of voices. Yeah? Okay. Let's keep going. Then last week we talked about a number of different things. We talked about the anatomy of the voice, like how the voice actually is produced. We talked about the voice types from all the way up sopranos, mezzo-sopranos, altos. We talked about countertenors, tenors, baritones, basses. We talked then about this whole spectrum here of like the lighter voices, coloratura, soprano, all the way up to held and big dramatic sounding voices. We looked at a bunch of different opera houses last week to see kind of how big they were. The European opera houses tended to be much smaller than the ones here in America. And then we looked at a bunch of different special demands on the singers, which, high notes, low notes, patter singing, coloratura, things like that. So, a question for you before we begin today. Musicians, right? We think of somebody who plays the violin, somebody who plays piano. What's different with singers? Singers are their own instrument. Gold star, you get the apple or whatever, the star pupil. I guess the apple goes to the teacher, whatever, you get the sticker. That's it. Yeah, singers are the own instrument. So I think this point is really important to make among singers, right? Because if you think about it, if you play a Pepe Romero guitar, and you're going to play some flamenco music, and all of a sudden you break a string on the guitar, you go out and buy a new string and you put it on the guitar. Or let's say now instead of playing flamenco music, you now want to play instead some maybe Bach lute music on your guitar. Well, you would get a different guitar and you would play that instrument. If you're playing maybe the Beethoven Emperor Concerto, you would want to play it on a Hamburg Steinway piano because that feels like the right instrument, versus if you were playing a Philip Glass piano concerto and you want maybe a dreamy, smoother, more atmospheric sound because it's Philip Glass. Singers, we are our own instrument. So we're both the person playing the instrument and we are the instrument. So oftentimes you have to differentiate when you're listening to a singer. Do I not like the quality of their voice? Like, is it the instrument I don't like? Or is it the way they're playing their instrument? Does that make sense? Okay. I just think that's an important thing to think about. And I'll give you this example right here. This is, even if you don't read music, I think this point should hopefully make sense. This is, again, a piano vocal reduction. So this is the piano. These two, we call these staves. These are 3 staves, so staved together. The bottom 2 here, this is the right hand, and this is the left hand for the piano. So as you're going along, these are the notes the right hand would play, and these are the notes the left hand would play. And then as you go through, you notice here, this top line is for a cello or a bassoon. So here the bassoon plays ya ya da da dee da dee da ya dee da dee da dum. So right, that's for the bassoon. This is an excerpt from the opera Don Giovanni, and this is what it actually looks like in the orchestra, in the actual score. So what's the big difference? Words. Words. That, for me, is what we have to get started with. We have to start looking about words and how this all goes together. So again, singers are conveying literal meaning. You're actually saying words that have meaning, but then the music behind it also has meaning. So how does this all come together? Giuseppe Verdi, he was the greatest opera composer in history. He's the guy. If you need to know one opera composer in all of history, it's Giuseppe Verdi. And what he said is first comes the music and then comes the words. I say this is important because where a lot of people, they'll come to me and they'll say, hey, why doesn't Houston Grand Opera perform Phantom of the Opera, right? It's a great show. And I love Phantom of the Opera. I don't mean to be disparaging against it, but Houston Grand Opera will probably never do Phantom of the Opera because it's a musical, right? And the difference with musicals is musicals first come the words and then come the music. In opera, first comes the music, and then comes the words. Does that make sense for everybody? I just think that's an important thing to say, because we often think, well, in opera, is that really, the way it works? And it is. If we're talking about text, this is always interesting. So I've taken here the top 100 most commonly performed operas in the world. These are the languages that they all fall in. So we're going to play a little game together. This is the order of the languages that maybe one might assume. How many of the top 100 operas are Italian? Call it out. Just call it out. How many of the top 100 are Italian? 50. You say 100%. Every single opera. 70? Okay. 41. French. How many are in French? So now that means if we do 41, I'll do some quick math. We got 59 left. How many of those 59 are French? 15. Okay. Good. I like this game. German. Here we go. German opera. 30. Right? Okay. Russian. How many Russian operas? We're getting close to 100, mind you. I mean, I think, what is that? We're at 82. 10. Surprising, right? Can you name 10 Russian operas? I don't know if I can. Well, I can, but I mean, it's not easy. Most people can't. Czech. Janáček, very good. Janáček and Rusalka, Dvorak, right? English, how many English operas? 4. I would imagine probably Benjamin Britten, maybe Peter Grimes, I could see. English operas, let me see, maybe Midsummer Night's Dream, or Albert Herring, some operas like that are not as commonly performed. I would need to really think about it. Yeah. It could be maybe Dido and Aeneas could be one of them. Purcell, maybe. I would imagine that's in there. Okay, Latin. There's one. Any guesses? Anybody know what it is? I Pluribus It's cute. No, it's actually a bit of a trick, because Opera Base, which is this website that tracks this, counts Carmina Burana as an opera, which it's not. But opera companies have done it. They've performed it, and they've had a ballet company come in and dance around while the singers do it. But it's not an opera. So Opera Base, I'm going to show you this website, because this is really neat. If you're interested in opera, I just want to show you just kind of some resources that are available. This is here actually a list of the top 50 performed operas in the world. It's a big database that it exists. You can go to this website, operabase.com, and I'll show you the website here in 2 seconds. This is kind of interesting. But you notice, most commonly performed opera, Traviata, 4,162 productions around the world of Traviata. It's amazing. Then you get a drop-off Carmen. These are 3,000s, about half as many as you get to the Toscas. You go a little further down. The ones that start getting interesting to me, I think, when you get to hear Lustige Witwe, which is the Merry Widow. That's a German, Lustige Witwe, which would be very popular probably in Austria and Germany. Lucia, we were listening to in the beginning. Czardas-Fürsten, that's a very odd one by Kaloman. It's an opera very rarely performed. But you can see they start dropping off, and then here you start getting into some Russian operas. Over here you get Iolanta of Tchaikovsky, Pikova Dama, which is the Queen of Spades. Yeah, Mom's favorite, The Pearl Fishers by Bizet, is number 50. But keep in mind, this is out of tens of thousands of different operas, so these are still very popular. Let me actually show you this. You might enjoy seeing this. This is actually the website today for Opera Base. And what you can do is, okay, so let's say there's a singer we like. Let's say, okay, Aryeh Nussbaum Cohen, who, few of you may remember Aryeh. Does anybody know that name? He came to Brit Shalom. He was a countertenor, did a performance for us. His mother is a writer for Haaretz. Anyways, he's a very in-demand countertenor. So let's say we wanted to know Aryeh. Okay, there he is, Aryeh Nussbaum Cohen. So we would click on that. And so he has some videos and things. And okay, these are the performances that he has coming up. So he's doing here in Berlin, he's doing Written on the Skin, which is an opera by George Benjamin. And here you can see, okay, these are the singers and performers in it. He'll be performing with, okay, who is this conductor, Mark Albrecht? Let's click on him. And then it'll take us to Mark Albrecht's page. So if you want to really go deep in the weeds on opera singers and know about all the productions around the world that are happening when and the singers you like, if you want to follow them, this is the place to do it. Charles put Jamie Barton in here, and it's 1,000 pages long because she's one of the most in-demand singers in the world. Okay, so let me go back into this presentation here. Okay, so we're talking about languages. I want to now put on a video for you. I'll tell you who this man is after we watch the video. His name is Nico Costel, and this was, I'll just explain to you, he tells what this is, but he was a very in-demand character tenor, which means he's not the leading tenor. He's not the one who gets the girl, and sings the romantic aria, but he's kind of a supporting role. He's like the house standard guy that they're like, oh, you can come in and tell everybody dinner is ready. That kind of guy on the stage, right? So Nico had been doing this role at the Metropolitan Opera for many, many years, and the director asked him to audition to do it in his production, and he was very offended. So he put together this video, which I want to share with you.
Nico. About 8 years ago, the Metropolitan Opera decided to do a new production of Ariadne of Naxos, directed by an Englishman bearing a biblical name, having the personality of a boiled clam. And of course, I wanted to do the Haushofmeister, a part that I had done for many years. And I was informed by management that he had other ideas. However, if I could be willing to audition, he would listen to me. So in order to make sport of the whole thing, because I wasn't particularly thrilled about auditioning for some English director after being 22 years in the company and having had considerable success as the Haushofmeister in previous performances, I decided to have a good time and amuse myself with this audition. So I prepared a menu of different readings of the Haushofmeister's first lines, which are, first in English, "How can I be of service? Must, however, tell you that I am very much in a hurry. The preparations for tonight's assemblée in the house of the richest man in Vienna, as I may call my master." Well, this is the way I do it with my Viennese accent in the opera house. Womit kann ich dienen? Muss allerdings bemerken, dass ich pressiert bin. Die Vorbereitungen zur heutigen großen Assemblée im Hause des reichsten Mannes in Wien, wie ich meinen gnädigen Herrn wohl betiteln darf. And this is the way I would do it with a German-Prussian accent. Womit kann ich dienen? Muss allerdings bemerken, dass ich pressiert bin. Die Vorbereitungen zur heutigen großen Assemblée im Hause des reichsten Mannes in Wien, wie ich meinen gnädigen Herrn wohl betiteln darf. This is how I would do it like an American. Womit kann ich dienen? Muss allerdings bemerken, dass ich pressiert bin. Die Vorbereitungen zur heutigen großen, Assemblée im Hause des reichen Mannes in Wien, wie ich meinen gnädigen Herrn wohl betiteln darf.
This video goes on for about 10 minutes. He does it in a Puerto Rican accent. He does it in a Russian accent. He does it. So Nico Costel was one of my teachers at Juilliard. Nico Costel spoke 13 languages. His father was in the diplomatic corps, and he grew up, I think, actually in Buenos Aires, if I'm not mistaken. And his mother was also very well educated, spoke many different languages, and they insisted on having a nanny who spoke 3 more. He grew up, he was Jewish, he speaks Yiddish. He passed away a few years ago, but Nico Costel was considered the greatest linguist in opera, really, of the 20th century. And he was, at Juilliard, we would have teachers that was, if, let's say you were coaching, I was doing, let's say, Carmen, I was preparing to do Escamillo, the bullfighter. So I would sign up for French language coaching with Denise Massé or Thomas Grubb. If I was doing Italian, if I was getting ready to sing Don Giovanni, I would sign up with Corradina Caporello or some of the Italian coaches. If it was German, it would be this one. Or you could go to Nico for any of them. That was the deal with Nico. Nico put together a series of books. Here, this is a picture actually at Houston Grand Opera in our library. You can see these volumes. This is his life's work. He went through, you notice here, this is Faust, Romeo and Juliet, La Juive, Mignon, Hamlet, Thais, Pearl Fisher's mom, Pêcheur de Perles, and Manon, Le Prophète. And he does it with every opera. And what he does is he goes through every line of it, and he takes the character Marcello, the opening of La Bohème, sings, Questo mar rosso mi ammolisce e assidera. This means questo, mar, sea, red, me, soaks, and freezes. So if you don't speak the language, you get Nico's book. Now above, you have the IPA. This is the International Phonetic Alphabet. So you know that it's que instead of questo, instead of questo. So as a singer, you study all of these little gradations of vowels. The IPA, which is literally here spelled out, IPA, IPA. This is how singers learn to pronounce languages that they don't actually speak. It's the International Phonetic Alphabet, and again, this is just a blown up version of what I showed you on the previous slide, right? So, for example, here, if most Americans might say ammolisce, right? Double M. So he puts an AM with a colon and then another N, ammolisce. So you really get the cadence of the language when you're doing it. It gets incredibly complex. The IPA is something that we study as singers in conservatory. You learn everything from whether the vowel is closed, if it's open, where it sits in the mouth. Oo is in the back, E is in the front. So here, E, based on where the vowel goes in the mouth. So it gets incredibly complex. These are the vowels, these are the consonants. So singers will obsess over this, and this is actually an example of what a singer might write in their score. If you went to my apartment and pulled any of my opera scores for roles that I've performed off of my shelf, and you opened to any page, you'd probably see something like this. So you notice here, the singer is preparing the role of Suor Angelica. That's an opera by Puccini. Sister Angelica, she's a nun in a convent, and in this scene, she's singing this big aria to God. And here the singer, because the Italian is what is sung, writes out the IPA, liberamente al deziar, precorre, and so that way they know how to do it, and they have the literal translation. Not what's printed there, but they did their homework. They went into Nico's book, and they got the literal translation. So that's how singers will prepare for a lot of this. So when we're listening to singers, I'm listening to, does it sound like they're a native speaker? If someone's singing in Spanish and they sound like a gringo, it's not going to work, right? But if somebody's singing, it's the same thing. If any of us heard somebody singing in Hebrew and it just didn't sound right, we wouldn't accept it to our ears. So I'm analyzing always from the place of language. So with that said, we're going to play a little game now. I want anybody to tell me what this singer is singing. The words. Can you make out the words, the pronunciation? Okay, here we go. Anybody?
Are you asking us what language or what words?
Either.
No.
Okay, well, I'll help you on the first one. It's English. It's English. There it is. That's what she's singing. All right, we're going to go back and listen to it again. Okay. Did she not do her homework? Did she not do her IPA? Okay, right. She's a virtuoso. I agree. Well, before I answer that, let's hear how she looks, how she talks about it. What does she say?
I was always criticised for my mushy diction, but I'm sorry. I did, I think, have a reasonably round sound, and it got me a long way.
That's her take. I was often criticized for my diction, but I think I had a very round sound, and it did okay by me. It's Joan Sutherland, right? There's no wrong opinions. Go ahead. Yeah. Okay.
So in opera, would you say that you give her a fuller grade in the aesthetic experience because
Yeah.
you make up the words?
No, absolutely not. I don't care. I don't care, because to me the words there are so insignificant in that aria, right? She's not. It's not like, if this were a Puccini opera, right? And this is La Bohème, and this is the moment where Mimi is finally telling Rodolfo how much he has meant to her. Like, I need to hear those words. Those words matter to me in that moment. But there's moments where I just want the high note. Remember what Verdi said: prima la musica e dopo le parole. First is the music, and then comes the words. Okay? Yeah. I totally agree. Well, I think we're getting into a really interesting area to say it doesn't matter the enunciation of the words. The question is, would I sacrifice maybe a little bit of clarity for beauty? And yes, I would. Let's give another example here. My favorite singer, Franco Corelli. This is a great example for me of singers who are singing something that is so outside of their wheelhouse. He's singing this like Mario Lanza kind of American schmaltzy song, and he's this like guy from East Italy who worked on the docks. He should sing Neapolitan songs, O Sole Mio, but here you go. Listen to the words, pronunciation. I love that song and I love his voice, but it seems so odd to me. There's something because it's so Italian. It's because if you think about it, an Italian, name one Italian person you know, right? Their names all end in vowels, right? All Italian words end in vowels. So in English, our words very frequently end with consonants. Because it's the way that they connect, and it's part of what we're going to talk about in a minute. That's why Italian is such a beautiful language to sing in, right? It connects one word into the next like a Brio train sets where the magnets just go right into the next one. A question I'm often asked is, do singers really know all the languages that they sing in? That's wonderful grammar, in which they sing. My participle is dangling. But what do you think? Do singers actually know all the languages? No, we can't know fluently every language in which we sing, but the idea, that's kind of the struggle and the joy of opera too, is that you climb the mountain as high as you can and try to get as close to being native with that language. I'll give you one of my great examples of this. So this is an area of recitative. If you remember from my first class, it feels like a million years ago, 2 weeks ago, I showed Leonard Bernstein sitting at the piano and explaining recitative, like, oh, the price of milk has gone up 2 cents, or whatever he said, you know. This is one of those recitative moments. This is the moment in Don Giovanni. I'll set the stage for you very quickly because I want to illustrate a point about the power of language in opera and how important it is for singers to really know not just the translation, but to know the language. Here, Don Giovanni arrives at the countryside wedding of these peasants, Zerlina and Mazzetto. They're lovely young couple. She has garlands in her hair. The country folk are dancing around, and he sees this is the bride and groom, and he says, hey, that bride is pretty nice. I'm going to move in for the kill myself. So knowing that he's this philanderer and womanizer, he approaches them, and Zerlina says to Don Giovanni, she says to him, oh, my Mazzetto, oh, il mio Mazzetto è un uomo d'ottimo cuore. He has an optimal heart. He has a good heart. And he says, oh, anch'io, vedete, and so do I. You will see. He says, voglio che siamo amici. I want for us to be friends. And then he says, il vostro nome. What is your name? She says, Zerlina. And then Giovanni says to Mazzetto, the husband, he says, and yours? È il tuo. If you've studied any kind of Romance languages, Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, you'll know there's a formal tense of speaking. It would be usted, or something like that. In here, he uses that tense to the bride. He says, il vostro nome. And the subtext of that is overwhelming. For a cavalier, a nobleman, to go to this peasant girl and refer to her in this formal tense would never happen. And what he's saying is, look at what your life could look like with me. Il vostro nome. And then he turns to this idiot of a groom and he says, el tuo, and yours. You're a peasant, but you're a noblewoman. Go ahead. Oh, please. Yeah, sure.
And there was subtitles on the screen,
Yeah.
which was very distracting to me.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Very distracting because I teach my students, you need to listen aesthetically to music. We didn't know it was going to come right over those elements. And if I get too focused on the eyes, my brain, my ears,
Yeah.
shut down. So I don't understand how opera buffs that don't speak the language get anything out of that in real time.
Sure. And I think what I would argue to you is that you wouldn't know it linguistically, but you would feel the energy that character, that if I was playing Don Giovanni and I was talking to Zerlina one way and then I turned to Mazzetto, you would sense that energy. You know what I mean? So you're right, though. And I think the question is, it's prima la musica, like first is the music, but then there's a second part, and then come the words. The words do matter. The story still has to happen, but it can't take precedence over the music.
So I guess what I'm asking, how would I experience that? Don't worry about the words, but just listen to the tone.
No, I would say learn the words, study the words, know what, not...
Before you go to the opera?
You could if you want. I would recommend just go to the opera and read it and be in the moment. And if there's a moment where it feels like I'm done reading, close your eyes and listen to the music. There's no right way to enjoy it. You know what I mean? But let me just play for you very quickly because I want to get to a couple things here. This is that quick little moment, and see if you can hear, just in the Italian, the difference in the way the baritone speaks to Zerlina and Mazzetto. It goes by quickly, so I'll pay attention here.
Il mio Masetto è un uomo d'ottimo cuore.
Quant'io vedete, voglio che siamo amici. Il vostro nome
Serenina,
e il tuo Masetto. Oh caro il mio Masetto, cara la mia Zerlina, esibisco la mia protezione.
Did you pick up on it? It's subtle, right? But the only reason, look, we can go in the weeds on any number of things in opera, right? But like, this is just to show those little subtle differences in things that singers would sing. I'm going to move us through. I want to tell you about this Hungarian soprano. Her name was Leila Genscher. Very, very, these days, not many people know about her anymore. She was a singer who did a lot of great singing after World War II in Italy. She was especially famous for doing the three queens. These are called Le Tre Regine, the three queens of Donizetti. Donizetti was an opera composer, and he wrote three different operas that had roles for great queens in them. Mary Stuart, Anne Boleyn, Roberta Devereux. So she performed all three of those roles to great acclaim. And part of what Leila Genscher was known for, listen to this young kind of virginal sound that she creates. It's they would call it in singing voce infantile, because she wants to inhabit the innocence of this young bride preparing for her wedding. And it's just this innocent, beautiful color in her sound. Now listen to the same artist now inhabiting a different moment from the Three Queens when she plays Mary Stuart, and she has the showdown with, she calls her figlia impura di Bolena, you impure daughter of Boleyn. And she, you hear that same singer take on a totally different color in her sound now that she's full of rage and anger.
figlia impura di Bolena.
You notice that's a live recording from a live performance, and she whipped the audience into such a frenzy they just started applauding in the middle of the scene. Like that's the power of an artist like that, Leila Genscher. So again, I listen for those kinds of vocal colorings. When a character is angry, do they sound angry? When a character is really in love, do they sound in love? When a character is wounded, can I hear the pain in the sound? Those are all things I listen for. One of the greatest singers for me, and this was somebody that for me was a bit of a role model and a legend, Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau. I sang opera, I'll share this with you personally, to a certain extent, but my real passion more than anything was singing German art song, in particular Schumann, Strauss, Schubert, Beethoven, Brahms, Wolf. I mean, there were so Mahler, incredible art songs. As you'll know, I love the intimacy of just being right up close with an audience with a piano, and the idea of a huge orchestra and being separated, not having artistic control as much. It just wasn't as appealing to me. Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau was considered the master of art song. Art song is like the classical songs that are written by a lot of these composers, and he crossed over. Most art song singers sing opera, and most opera singers sing art song. But Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau, I want to go back to this idea of how you use the voice as different characters, and I want to play a video of him singing a song by Schubert. Schubert wrote this song when he was 18 years old. It's an incredible song. It kind of cemented him as one of the great composers of the whole Western music. And it's called the Erlking, or the Erlkönig. And the story of the Erlking is a man is riding home on a horse with his son, and he's on his way home, and the son starts to see this Erlking come out of the wisps, this kind of fantastical creature that wants to lure him in to the depths. And he turns to his father and he says, "Father, I'm afraid the Erlking is coming for me." And the father says, "It's just the mist, don't worry about it." And then the Erlking comes back and says, "Come, my boy, come with me. I have beautiful daughters and you'll play with me and I love you and you must come with me." And then the boy cries out to his father, and at the last minute, the Erlking grasps the boy and the father races home, and at the last minute, he realizes that his son is dead. And it's this really intense song, but the reason I want to play you Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau singing it is listen to, even with his voice, his eyes, how he inhabits each of the characters. You know when he's the boy, you know when he's the father, you know when he's just the narrator who's just setting the scene, and you know when he's the Erlking coming for the boy. Okay, so we're going to listen to this now.
Sie liegen und tanzen und singen dich ein. Sie liegen und tanzen und singen dich ein. Mein Vater, und siehst du nicht dort, Herr Königswächter am düsteren Ort? Ein Sohn, ich sehe es genau, es scheinen die alten Weiden so Ich liebe dich, mich reizt deine schöne Gestalt. Und bist du nicht willig, so brauch ich Gewalt. grauset's, reitet geschwind, hält in Armen das ächzende Kind.
Slows down.
Reicht den Hof mit Mühe und Not. In seinen Armen das Kind war tot.
Remarkable. Isn't that amazing? Had anybody heard of him, Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau before? Of course. Yeah. Amazing, amazing singer. There he is with Gerald Moore. That was his longtime collaborator, British pianist. He played for Yehudi Menuhin and Pablo Casals and all the great classical musicians, really, the 20th century. Okay, we talked about using the voice to show different characters, colors, text, meaning, how to sort of convey meaning. That's I think, mainly the theme of what we're going after so far today, is that singers really convey meaning. But now let's actually talk about singing, like the actual act of singing, not just the text and the meaning. So we talked last week, these were the 8 different vocal challenges that we went through very quickly. We saw high notes, low notes. Remember the one long phrase of that Russian baritone that connected all in one breath. We did soft singing, Franco Corelli, Leontine Price doing soft singing. Trills, remember 2 notes, like kind of fluttering back and forth. Coloratura was lots of quick notes, kind of like champagne bubbles, very fast. That was like a Let the Bright Seraphim Joan Sutherland was doing earlier today. That was a lot of coloratura. Patter singing, that's the very quick text, the bravo Figaro, bravo, bravissimo, bravo Figaro, that kind of stuff, patter singing. And then singing with a big orchestra. I want to talk for a minute, though, about the voice, actually, now as a singer. So most singers, most male singers and female singers, too, you think of your voice as having a chest voice. This is my chest voice right now. Head voice, goes up in a different kind of register, right? The area that kind of connects in the hourglass, the head voice to the chest voice, this little section here, that we refer to as our passaggio. Singers all talk about your passaggio. So, for example, this is my range, right, is right here. If I were to sit at a piano, I could sing comfortably down to maybe a low E, and I could go up to maybe a D, but right around D sharp, E flat, my voice has to flip into head voice. The way singers negotiate in and out of the head voice is what I listen for all the time. That's the shift. That's the car that's going up the hill, right? You understand, like if you're driving a manual transmission. Let me give you an example of a female artist doing this, Maria Callas. She's singing an aria here from an opera, La Gioconda, which is very rarely performed. It was popular in her day, but listen to her. She starts with this big kind of high note and then goes lower and lower and chestier in her sound. So this is a great example where you can clearly hear how different these registers sound in the voice. Could you hear the difference? I mean, that's a pretty extreme example of the head voice and the chest voice. And a lot of singers, what's interesting is in her age, in her generation of the 1960s and 1970s, a lot of the old Italian sopranos thought that was very crass to sing that way. To sing in the chest voice for a woman was too masculine. It was too brutal sounding. And she got a lot of flack for singing like that. But I play the recording just to illustrate what the sound of the chest voice is. There's many other examples we could go to, but I think that's a good one because you hear clearly the head voice and then the chest voice. I had the opportunity to sing Don Giovanni in New Jersey when I was like, what was that, Mom? I was like 18 or 19 or something. And there was a castmate who sang the Commendatore, which is the bass role, who was a FIDE ranked FIDE ranked chess master. And so he would hang out backstage because the Commendatore, he comes on at the beginning of the opera, literally in the first 5 minutes, and he gets killed. And then at the end of the opera, he gets invited to dinner, and he has to drag Don Giovanni down to hell. But there's about 2.5 hours where Nate would just hang out backstage, and anybody who wanted to learn how to play chess, he'd play chess with us. And so I learned a little bit of chess. I know nothing about chess. I was 18. I haven't kept it up. So if you're actually good at chess, don't challenge me. It'll embarrass me. But I do remember this. He used to explain to me that the way to win in chess is to actually think about who controls these center 4 squares. If you really have, if you're a great chess player, and maybe some of you are, and you can correct me on this, I don't know, I'm not the master here, but he explained that because it's through this center area that so much action happens, especially in the beginning and mid-game. When you get to the end game, that changes. But to really focus on who's controlling those squares and how many different things, it's the same thing in singing. That's your passaggio. Whoever wins in chess is the person who can negotiate. If you know how to figure out the flip between your chest voice and your head voice, and you can negotiate that transition, you win the game. So let me give you an example of this. Let's go back to my favorite tenor, Franco Corelli. Here he's singing an aria from Aida, which is Verdi's third to last opera, 1871. But this aria comes in the very beginning, Act 1, and he has to sing this phrase, Celeste Aida, and it goes up a full octave. But listen to when the voice shifts into head voice and when it doesn't. When does he keep it all chest voice? When does he flip? So let's listen to that. The plane. Pretty amazing, right? So when you listen to it with that focus, like I often think about that, I know if a singer is going to crack on the high note way before the high note comes, because I know they haven't controlled the passaggio. They haven't figured out the middle of the voice yet. So that's something I listen for a lot. Another thing I listen for a lot is this term, legato. This is something that's frequently misunderstood. The term legare actually in Italian means to carry. So you say, let go, I carry something. So legato is to literally carry the voice from one note to the next. This is, it doesn't just come in vocal music. This is a piano excerpt. This is the start to Ave Maria, right? It's written legato, play it, carry the notes. I was told originally as a singer that you should think that you're Tarzan on the vine, you're swinging from one note to the next. You should connect them. They should be beautiful, like water flowing over rocks. It should always have this feeling of movement and motion. So I'm always listening as a singer for legato. That's something that's so important to me. Legato also has a feeling to me of that you've milked that note for all it's worth and you have no choice but to sing the next note because the note before it is now dead. You've sucked the life out of it. So you have to go on. I'm going to play a tenor, Vittorio Grigolo, who's a very popular tenor right now, and in my mind is a mediocre legato. And then I'm going to play for you incredible legato. I want to juxtapose so you really drive this point home of what does legato sound like. sounds like a sausage to me. It makes me anxious. I'm like, oh God, like, will you please just sing one note and stop? I feel seasick. Listen again, see if you hear what I'm talking about. Okay, I can't do any more of that. Now we're going to listen to real legato. Here we go. He's like an ocean liner, like it's relentless. That sound will not be stopped. You can't. It's the breath, it's everything. I mean, it's sustained, it's connected. Yeah, it's not this, it's too like, it's like the first guy, I feel like he's singing for himself. He's not generous with his sound. Give me that voice. Stop holding it for your own little private moment and let me be moved by the sound. Listen to UC Berling bring it home. Let's all keep going on this. That's legato. That's gorgeous singing. I would pay any amount of money to hear singing like that, and I'm not interested really in the other thing. I just want that, you know. We've got like 2 minutes, so I'm just going to race through just a couple slides to kind of tie us up. So I am a big fan of live recordings. I think, you know, the sound quality in opera, of course, we want these studio recordings. They sound a lot better. The sound is cleaner. But I'm a big fan of some of these wild kinds of performances. I'm going to just give you a minute here of Franco Corelli singing the final scene here of Carmen. And in the moment where Giulietta Simeonato, the Carmen, throws the wedding ring back at Don Jose, he begins screaming. He just gets so wild on stage. And these are moments in opera that I kind of live for. So let's hear some of this. I have to stop before this next phrase he's going to sing. I apologize, but it's important. He says to her, and you're going to laugh at me. And then he himself goes, and continues singing. I'd never heard another singer do that until this recording. That's not in the score, by the way. He's running around the stage screaming, "Tutto è finito," everything is finished. I mean, like, what kind of madness grips a performer? I will tell you, Franco Corelli, and we'll close with this because we're at 10:45. Franco Corelli, there's a legendary story in Naples where I was just at this theater less than 2 months ago, San Carlo in Naples, Italy. Franco Corelli was singing this opera, Carmen, on the stage at Naples in a performance in 1961, and he heard, after he finished Act 2, his big flower aria, which ends with a high B flat, and was beautiful. The whole audience goes crazy, and he hears one person booing him. And his eyes dart around, and he spots someone in the box, and he sees him, and he walks off the stage. In Teatro San Carlo, Naples, I was just there, I can attest, the backstage does not connect to the front of house. He had to, in full costume, walk through the streets of Naples to go to the front of the Teatro San Carlo. Everybody was in confusion, they didn't know what was going on. He comes walking through the lobby in costume makeup, goes into the box, punches the guy in the face, then walks back through the streets of Naples, goes backstage, goes right on stage, and keeps singing. A madman, but I kind of love that. I don't know. Is that bad? Does that make me a bad person? Then I kind of am interested in that. Anyway, I want to thank all of you for coming to these classes. It's been a lot of fun. I will confirm, we'll send out an email if we are in fact doing the 4th class next week. We'll send out an email here by Tuesday of this week, so keep your eyes just peeled for that if we decide to do it. There's just a couple things we don't know, just schedule-wise and stuff, but if we do, the final class then would be just on listening to some legendary performances and things like this. I have just in my back pocket some great Leontine Price, some Maria Callas, some even Lauritz Melchior, but even some more current singers too, which might be interesting. But otherwise, I hope so far the class has encouraged you to maybe get a little deeper into the art form. And like I said, we've got Opera Base. You can always email me if you want recommendations of recordings and things to get started on. And I would say HGO has 2 performances remaining of Falstaff, which is a fabulous opera. If you're not a die-hard opera person yet, Falstaff's a great one. It's a comedy, it's Verdi, it's a great cast. It's Wednesday night and Friday night. We still have some tickets for that. But I hope you all enjoyed it, and thank you so much for joining me.
Are we supposed to vote about the last session?
No, it's not a I think the vote has come in that we want to do it. I just need to confirm that we can do it. So I'll let you know. Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good Sunday. Yeah.
That is all in character to opera, the passion of what he did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Part of what's so wonderful about opera.
Yeah.